Hi everyone! Today I've decided to embrace the Barbie that it's in me because I want to talk about Betty Draper. Betty Draper was probably the most despised character in Mad Men and one of the most hated characters, especially female characters, ever. But Betty Draper was my favorite Mad Men character and one of the best I ever seen on television. So here's why. While every Mad Men character has flaws, Betty's ones are not as entertaining, definitely not relatable, yet incredibly realistic. Consider the difference with Joan, a female character which, although not perfect, is much more voluptuous, liberated, opinionated. In contrast, Betty is the typical ice princess, which we relegate as the killjoy woman.
You're so profoundly sad.
No, it's just my people are Nordic.
The comparisons between Joan and Betty are quite relevant because they feed into the classical and stereotypical Madonna/whore dichotomy, which is still very much relevant in our society. As modern women, we tend to appreciate Joan more because we see her as an extension of ourselves and what we think we would have done in the time that Mad Men takes place. Natasha Cooper explains it pretty well when she says, "Part of the reason why Joan is so appealing is because she's part of our worldview. Of course, we would choose the more liberated, earthy, new school version of a woman. But unfortunately, Betty doesn't get to liberate her opinions in any way. She doesn't get to dance in a conga line at a Christmas party. She can't just disappear to California whenever she's had enough, and she can't focus her energies in work. She's relegated to a role inside the home."
Where have you been? You disappeared.
I had to have some time to think about things.
Must be nice. Needing time and just taking it. All on your own terms. Not wondering what anybody thinks, me, the children.
She's often depicted by other characters in the show as this annoying woman, as she's some sort of obstacle.
Jesus, Andrew, just once could you take my side?
No one's ever on your side, Betty.
Like all unsatisfied and repressed women, she's accused of being a victim or playing the victim card. The problem is that she is a victim. She's probably the most victimized character of the show, and we tend to dislike those sort of women, don't we? Look at her playing the victim, trying to drown herself for attention after she found out that her husband is a murdering, meth-making psychopath. Feminists were waiting for the moment, the liberation moment in which Betty would have finally found a copy of the feminine mystique, finally started a journey of self-actualization and stopped saying things like, "Wait till your father hear my side of the story." But as seasons went on, Betty didn't progress. In many ways, she regressed. She's horrible to her daughters, she leaves Don only to marry another version of him, she becomes even more cruel and unsympathetic. Basically, she tries to make everyone around her as miserable as she is.
Just because you're sad doesn't mean everybody has to be.
And that's another important point of her character. I've read a lot of fans saying online that they would have appreciated Betty more if just every once in a while she would be more joyous, failing to see the main point here, which is that Betty is clinically depressed.
What's wrong?
What's wrong? I hate this place. I hate our friends. I hate this town.
Her cruelness stems primarily from her desperation. Treating her children, her spouse, and the help as horribly as she can is the only way that she knows to assert herself.
There's nobody there. They hanged up.
Hang it up.
Why'd they hang up?
Probably a wrong number. People do it all the time.
But I could hear somebody and they heard me.
My goodness, Sally Draper, try not to take everything so personally.
She wasn't always like that. In Mad Men, we see some parts of her previous life, how active she was. Her love for horse riding and modeling, which her mother equalized with prostitution, and how every meaningful person in her life, her mother before and Dawn afterwards, manipulated her and what brought her joy to inflict her pain and place her in the correct role which she was supposed to occupy. She's cheated on multiple times and isolated from the outside world by Dawn, blamed when Roger tried to have his way with her, publicly embarrassed and called a whore.
You seem to be having a grand time.
I liked the wine.
You made a fool of yourself.
Why would she say that?
You were throwing yourself at him, giggling at his stories.
I was being friendly. He's your boss.
I don't like to be treated that way in my own home.
Even when she's bold and she tries to express her issues, set therapists just reports everything back to Dawn. In every season of Mad Men, she finds out something about Dawn and their life being a lie. And when she finally reaches the point of no return, when she finds out that Don Draper isn't even Don Draper, she can finally let go of her anger. It's like you open this black box of never-ending delusion and resentment that she tried to keep shut for so many years. And obviously now that it's open, the effects are very ugly to watch.
What is wrong with you?
She's incredibly raw, and that's not admirable or revolutionary as some feminists would like it to be, but that's real and completely logical in her progression as a character. In previous seasons, when she felt aggravated during a dinner with Dawn, for example, or when she subconsciously compared a life with that of a divorced woman, that yes, she was divorced, but she was also incredibly independent, her psychological reactions gave away a lot of what she felt. A manifestation of what doctors of the time called housewife syndrome. In season 1, when she shoots the pigeons after calmly gardening and following through her housewife chores, it's another manifestation of the resentment that she has towards these birds that can just fly away and escape their place. Because her cage may look beautiful from the outside, but it still is a cage.
She wanted me to be beautiful so I could find a man. There's nothing wrong with that. But then what? Just sit and smoke and let it go till you're in a box?
The problem is that Betty doesn't disregard nor completely embrace everything that she's supposed to be and everything that she looks like to others.
Do people think I'm weak?
No, it's just you're so sweet and perfect.
I'm not.
She's unsatisfied and she doesn't act out her dissatisfaction with grand gesture of feminist disruption. She's petty and fucking angry, and that's very difficult to digest. On the outside, Betty is everything a woman was supposed to be like, the quintessential housewife raised to be a decorative, empty image. As modern women, we see her and we cringe at her behavior and at everything that she represents, but that's exactly the problem. We see her through this modern prism, failing to acknowledge the realness of her upbringing back in the 50s. That's when the realism of Mad Men works at its best, when we observe the antiquated ideals of masculinity and femininity that Dawn and Betty embody and have successfully achieved. And within this characterization is when Mad Men works at its best in instead disrupting those idealistic promises of the time, when we see how both Dawn and Betty are unfulfilled, deeply unhappy human beings, partners, and parents. Another typical response to Betty's unlikeness is her abusive behavior towards her children, specifically her daughter.
What the hell happened to you?
Calm down.
You cut her hair?
No.
I cut it. I'm sorry.
Hey! Betty!
And that's not only her unconscious reaction of her desperation and need for assertiveness that I've mentioned before, as that wasn't enough, but also, surprise, surprise, that Betty doesn't like being a mother.
I think I only had 2 more jobs, maybe 3, before we got engaged. And then I got pregnant. It's always a nightmare raising children in Manhattan, so we moved to Ossining. Suddenly I really felt so old.
Sounds obvious, yet it is never taken into consideration when talking about Betty. We like to assume that all women, even the miserable ones, must be good mothers, or at least should repent by the final act. We hardly take that very black and white stance when it comes to fathers. We can see that they're not good fathers, yet we automatically detach that role for them, and we can still see them as standalone characters to root for. We absolve and celebrate our male heroes even when they're violent, drunken, self-absorbed, incredibly flawed characters that smoke too much and sleep around. But the traits we find so appealing in these male heroes, their complexity, their confidence, their unapologetic behavior, are not as accepted in female characters. These become unlikable. One of the reasons why Betty doesn't like being a mother is because she still sees herself as a child. She almost developed a teenage pseudo-romance with Glenn. She insists to see a child psychologist in Blowing Smoke, and in Tomorrowland she lay down on a little girl's bed. Isn't this tragic to have this beautiful woman that exudes femininity, which is, by the way, the only positive trait that she has going on for her in men's eyes, and yet she feels like a child inside? Betty has a lot of terrible feelings, and perhaps the most terrible of them all is that she's not a child anymore. She has to adhere to adults' standards. People don't always change in reality. In fact, they rarely do, and that's a truth that doesn't work really well in entertainment, and that makes us automatically dislike a character which doesn't obtain her eureka moment in the end. Betty does break her patterns from time to time, like for example when she writes that final letter to Sally, or when she decides to go back to college.
Sally, I always worried about you because you marched to the beat of your own drum. But now I know that's good. I know your life will be an adventure.
Yet it was too late for Betty to completely revolutionize her life. So in the end, she just decides to accept it, and that may look quite disappointing for an audience.
I have class.
Why are you doing that?
Why was I ever doing it?
I'm glad the Mad Men didn't give an happy ending to Betty, and that they didn't backtrack onto the traumatic consequences that her life has transformed her into. Because in life, women as humans don't always do the right thing. They are complex, messy, selfish, and most often than not, big jerks that don't magically change their behavior at the end of the final act. I see so much carefulness nowadays to try and paint women under a good representation lens. But when we don't let female characters live up to the full spectrum of fucked up human emotions, we flatten them out. And when, as Rose Lemberg points out, we limit the range of strong female characters exclusively through the kick-ass heroine, we're implying that only one type of femininity is worth of being told. While this representation is obviously important, the warrior woman becomes a powerful archetype that makes us forget that there are other types of women in real life. That's why Betty Draper is an asshole, and I love her.
I'm bored.
Go bang your head against the wall.
Mom.
Thank you so much for watching this video about Betty. If you liked it, make sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe. Hit the bell button to make sure to be notified about my next videos.